Chapter 2. The Unusual Suspects. Ben hammered on the door impatiently. "Come on, Paul! How long can it take you to get kitted out? We'll be late, you know." Polly sighed and took one last look at herself in the dress mirror. The reflected image brought a smile to her face. Jeff Hornby had done her proud, providing an old-fashioned, sumptuous white ball gown with elaborate lacework. The fit was snug, admittedly. The corset was cruel even to her slim figure, but it was worth some discomfort to look so good. She only regretted that there was no time to do her hair to match. She swept regally towards the door, teetering on high heels, and forced to hoist skirts as she was, it was near impossible to walk any other way, and yanked it open, even as Ben was making to knock again. She wasn't disappointed by his reaction. "You can pop your eyes back into their sockets," she admonished playfully. "I thought we were in a hurry." "You look a proper duchess in that get-up," he said admiringly. "Thanks. You're not half bad yourself. An officer's uniform suits you." Even so, she couldn't resist adjusting his peaked cap and brushing a piece of fluff from his otherwise immaculate black jacket. Ben tugged at the collar of his starched shirt uncomfortably. "I'm not so sure. I keep thinking I don't know, getting above myself, I suppose." "Oh, Ben," Polly laughed. "You've even taken off those medals, haven't you? Did you see how many there were? If we're to be sneaking about looking for clues, I don't want to be jangling like a cow with a bell round its neck. Besides, I don't think it's possible to get so many gongs in a lifetime." "We are in the future, Ben. Perhaps they're more common now." "Yeah, well, the costumes aren't very futuristic, are they? This uniform's not much different to the 1966 version." "I bet it hasn't changed," teased Polly. "Your lot never did understand fashion." "Ha ha! Come on, let's find the doctor." "Already tried him," said Ben. "He's not in his room." "Do you suppose he's down in the bar already?" "Only one way to find out. Shall we go?" Ben held out his arm, and Polly grinned and took it. The interplanetary bar filled most of Deck B8, admittedly one of the smaller, lower levels. It was decorated in shades of blue and purple, with varied lighting effects and decorations adding a touch of the bizarre. A patch of green here, an unchecked rambling plant there, a stuffed alien menace in the corner. The overall effect was surreal, but somehow calming. Ben couldn't imagine the contemporary sounds of the Beatles or Manfred Mann blasting through this place. You were more likely, he considered, to hear whale song. As in the dining room, one wall blistered outward into space. Ben felt Polly stiffen on his arm as they swept down the short flight of steps from the doors. To her credit, though, she remained outwardly indifferent, determined not to let a phobia beat her. Of course, it helped that their grand entrance elicited a spattering of applause. Even Ben's chest inflated with pride, and he thought he might get used to this game after all. The other players had gathered in a medium-sized alcove, seated on a curved, cushioned bench around a long table. An illuminated, but empty, fish tank cast white light across them from behind, and an inanimate silver humanoid stood sentry-like nearby. It was supposed to be a Cyberman, Ben realized, but it bore scant resemblance to the monsters he had fought at the South Pole. It was too metallic, and the zip down its front was too obvious. One man appeared to have elected himself as the welcoming party. He was middle-aged and stout, with a round, ruddy face and sprouting tufts of hair which, Ben thought, made his head resemble a pineapple. Tiny pince-nez spectacles were balanced precariously on his nose. They suited him, although they might have come with the costume. He was wearing a long blue velvet jacket, a spotted bow tie, and a shirt of bright orange which was almost painful to look at. "Salutations, darlings!" he boomed in a resonant voice, standing and throwing wide his arms. Polly allowed him to hug her and to plant an affectionate peck on her cheek. Ben kept his distance and held out his hand, which the man pumped vigorously. "Lord Henry Mace, at your service. You may have heard of me. I'm a leading light of the Amdram scene, Earthside." "Oh, we haven't been to Earth for a few years," said Polly. Her diplomatic response seemed good enough for Mace, who proceeded to introduce the other 3 people at the table. "These delectable young ladies are Daphne McAllister and Terry Willis, wasn't it, dear? I thought so. And the upstanding young man in the policeman's robes becomes Brian Melrose, chartered accountant by day." Polly performed the introductions on behalf of herself and Ben, who glanced about the room and wondered if the doctor was hiding in one of its nooks. The only other person he could see was a man with a thin black beard dressed in leathers. He was slumped in a corner, ignoring everyone else. He seemed to be engrossed in a paperback detective novel, but his dark glasses must have made it impossible to read in the subdued light. "I love your costume," said Daphne McAllister to Polly. "Did you make it yourself?" "No, it was supplied for me," she admitted. "It does look good, doesn't it? It's a bit awkward, though. I don't know how I'm going to sit down." "You must try, dear girl," said Henry Mace. He beckoned her to take a place beside him. "I brought along my own apparel for this adventure. I, appropriately, am to portray a thespian, which is no great stretch of my talents, of course." Polly gathered up copious folds of fabric and manoeuvred herself, with difficulty, into the proffered seat. Ben perched on the edge of the bench, once more uncomfortable among strangers. "We're supposed to be pop stars. Melody and Harmony, the tuneful twins. Should be a giggle." Daphne half stood to show off her blouse, miniskirt, and leggings, the patterns of which suggested to Ben that a dozen colours had died in a crash. Terry supported an identical outfit. "Groovy," enthused Polly. Then, remembering where she was, "I mean, it's nice." Terry Willis's grunt indicated that she didn't think so. Brian Melrose didn't seem to care. His posture was tense, and he kept scratching at his throat. His expression was doleful, but this was partly a product of his thin face, long nose, and sagging cheeks. His hair was fair and thinning, and the bulky armoured uniform he wore was several sizes too big. He looked out of place here, as Ben felt. "I hope we don't have to sing, though," said Daphne confidently. "I don't think either of us have sung since we were in the school choir together, have we, Ter?" "Ah, musicals. You only need ask, my dear. I've starred in dozens." Mace's voice was loud and rich, demanding attention. Ben could see he enjoyed being at centre stage. "Of course, I've had extensive voice training. My tonsils are a finely honed instrument." To the amazement of everyone, he burst into a song about business being business and always aiming to please. Ben didn't recognize the tune, but he scarcely needed to hear that Mace's baritone voice veered up to a semitone away from each note, and not always in the same direction. Polly and Daphne looked at each other and struggled to control laughing fits. Terry was less than amused. "When you said an instrument, I didn't think you meant a chainsaw." Mace was quiet and instantly. "If you don't wish the benefit of my experience," he said sniffily. "How about the benefit of your closed mouth?" suggested Terry, with a humorless smile. Mace sulked. Terry studied her fingernails with forced nonchalance, and everyone else shuffled feet and avoided each other's eyes. Daphne broke the tense moment. "So, you two come from a colony world?" she inquired brightly, addressing Ben. "That's right," he said, and quickly stood before she could ask him which one. "Is the bar open yet? I don't know about you lot, but I ain't half ready for a drink." The doctor had taken a quick inspection tour, which ended back on A1, the lowest residential level, on which all the guests appeared to be staying. He had studied the floor plans for long enough to have them more or less memorized. Now he stared out of a corridor window near his room, running through calculations in his head. Even taking into account the refractive qualities of the plastic shielding and a safety margin for his rough estimates of distance, he knew something was amiss. 2 pairs of footsteps approached, and, although he remained apparently pensive, he switched some of his attention to the task of eavesdropping on the conversation in progress. One never knew when a stray tidbit of information may come in useful. "Think it's a holiday for me, do you?" Cultured female tones were complaining. "I was supposed to be in Paris this weekend, running the biggest hotel in the world called Leisure Portfolio. Instead, I'm shanghaied to this hole and expected to play manager, receptionist, chef, cook, and bottle washer." "It's not my fault, Miss Hayes," protested the more familiar voice of Jeff Thornby. "I had everything organised until your employers bailed out on me." "If you had presided over as many international conventions as I, you would not use the word organised in reference to this petty mismanagement operation." The doctor turned as the pair drew level. Hornby stopped and smiled weakly. Miss Hayes, an upright 30-something with tied-up hair and neat pinstriped jacket and skirt, didn't care to acknowledge his presence. She strode on, and Hornby called after her plaintively, "You will do what you can about those dinners, won't you?" Her reply, while indiscernible, was clearly resentful. "Ah, the tribulations of management." "Aren't you getting into costume?" asked Hornby. "We'll be starting in a few minutes." "Of course," said the doctor gently. Hornby hurried on, with the stooped shoulders and urgent gait of the chronically harassed. As the doctor fiddled with his keycard reader, a door was flung open at the far end of the corridor. An elderly gentleman emerged, his white hair growing wild about a prominent bald spot. He was wearing a tweed jacket and trousers, and a white shirt tail flapped behind him as he pivoted to shout back into his room, "Well, one of us has got to go down there or we'll jeopardize the whole plan." The doctor shrank back into the shallow alcove provided by his doorframe. Somebody must have replied to the man's protestation, although he wasn't close enough to hear. The angry rejoinder, however, was more than audible. "No, you just sit there and play with your toy. I'll cover for you as usual." The sound of a ferociously slammed door still echoed, even after the man had stomped out of view towards the elevator lobby. The doctor eased himself into his room. Polly could see that Ben was having problems. She joined him at the circular central bar, hovering uncertainly before one of several terminals. "It's a serve-yourself gizmo," he explained. "But I can't go asking how to use it. Better give the game right away." Polly sighed. They were both used to the problems caused by the doctor's insistence on keeping his time-travelling capabilities a secret. They accepted the ruling, though. Apart from anything else, it avoided longer explanations. "You'll also make them suspicious if you take much longer," she warned. "You said you were getting these drinks 10 minutes ago." "And that's another thing. I hope we can charge this lot to our rooms, because I don't even know what kind of money they use these days. For that matter, the doctor better have some way of paying our bills planned. I don't fancy spending 6 months on KP duty here." "You worry too much. Here, let me try." "No need, I've almost cracked it." "What does this do?" Polly reached past Ben and stabbed at a red button labelled Help. She jumped back, startled, as the menacing figure of a stereotypical movie vampire appeared from nowhere across the bar. "Good evening, sir, madame. My name is Thomas, and I represent the automated systems of the Hotel Galaxian. How may I assist you?" Ben composed himself and complained, in a slightly aggrieved tone, about the complexities of ordering. As Thomas patiently explained the function of each keypad and the meaning of each symbol, Polly's eyes explored the room. They lighted upon a slowly revolving reflective globe hanging over a corner, an enlarged Escher-type maze on one wall, a flickering red light above a shocking yellow sign reading "Danger, Radiation Hazard." That had to be a joke, didn't it? Yes, of course it did. Another example of the designer's esoteric tastes. She was more interested in people. She nudged Ben in the ribs, distracting him from the task of putting the now-departed vampire's tuition into practice. "Who's the man over there?" "Oh, him," said Ben without interest. "He was there when we arrived, just reading. Looks like he doesn't want to talk." Polly stole another glance at the leather-clad stranger and said, "He's a bit old to be dressed like a rocker, isn't he? Someone should tell him." Ben shrugged and turned his attention back to the terminal. With a grim smile of determination, he pressed the final button. Behind the bar, a hatch opened. 6 glasses trundled dutifully out along a conveyor belt, pausing beneath the relevant pumps and optics to be filled. Polly couldn't help but chuckle. "I wonder if all bars are like that nowadays, or just this one." "You've seen the rest of the room," said Ben dryly. "What do you think?" The drinks arrived, and Ben picked up 3. Polly opted for 2, mindful of her heels. Better to make a second trip than to ruin this lovely dress. "I'll go over and talk to him," she said, as they made their way back to the table. "Who?" "The rocker." "Nah, leave him alone, Pole. He obviously wants peace and quiet. He's probably sick of listening to Lord Henry Mace." "Don't be rotten, Ben. You've only just met the man." "I've heard enough from him, though. He's like a child, desperate for attention." "You said something similar about the doctor," she reminded him. "Henry Mace is an eccentric, that's all." "Pole, the doctor's what you call eccentric. This guy's a ruddy nutter." "How many people are in the hotel at the moment?" the doctor asked Thomas. He was sitting cross-legged on his bed, recorder poised at his mouth. He often found music conducive to his concentration. The holographic vampire pursed his lips as if thinking. In reality, the doctor knew, the information would be provided by a microprocessor far away. Then, 12, sir, he answered, including your good self. "There's no chance of anyone being here without your knowing it. Say, if they didn't arrive through the docking bays." "May I remind you that your own mode of transport is unknown to me," said Thomas politely. "However, I was aware of your heat signature from the moment of your arrival, and of your identity from the time your booking was registered." "There's no fooling you, is there, Thomas?" "I hope not, sir." The doctor blew a low, mournful note on the recorder. "Except for when it comes to mysterious messages, of course," he muttered, mostly to himself. "I don't suppose you could tell me why the stars seem to be out of alignment either." The group in the bar had split into 2, with Ben in the middle. To his left, Polly and Brian Melrose were listening politely to accounts of Mace's past acting triumphs. "And when I turned around, they were all wearing bowler hats," he roared with exaggerated humour. "Bowler hats, I tell you." To his right, Daphne and Terry reminisced about their school days together. From what Ben could overhear, Terry was determinedly puncturing her friend's attempts to romanticize the experience. Mr. Morris was not a decent old bloke, Daphne. He was a perverted lech. How could you not know about him and Mandy Simpson? Ben took a long swig from his pint of bitter beer. Hair of the dog always did the trick to his mind, but found his gaze lingering on the 2 young women through the bottom of the glass. There was no denying that both were extremely attractive. Daphne's was a classical beauty, with full shoulder-length red hair, glistening eyes, and every curve where it should be. Terry, on the other hand, had more severe features, heightened by a harsh application of makeup. Her black tresses were cut short, and her eyes were a hard green. Still, Ben thought, she looked the more genuine of the pair, the one with character. He preferred that to Daphne's powder-smooth skin and mannequin symmetry. Of course, neither woman could hold a torch to Polly, but Ben harboured no illusions on that score. They were from different sides of life, only friends at all because, amid a barrage of the unfamiliar, including the Doctor, whose very identity could change at the drop of a stovepipe hat, they had only each other to rely on for consistency and understanding. Once the TARDIS returned them to London 1966, if it ever did, Polly Wright would be raving straight back up the King's Road with the in crowd, and Ben Jackson would return to the barracks alone. What do you do in real life, then? It took him a moment to realise that Brian Melrose, having quietly extricated himself from Mace's audience, was addressing him. It was the first time Ben had heard his voice. It was quiet and nasal, as if the owner had a cold. "I'm a seaman there, too. Not such a high rank, though." Ben hoped not to have to elaborate. Who knew how much the structure and duties of the merchant navy might have changed in 200 years? "How about you? You're an accountant, aren't you?" Melrose nodded. "My company sent me on this weekend. They said it was a character-building exercise. To tell the truth, it isn't my sort of thing." "I know how you feel, mate." As both men sipped their pints, Ben heard Polly ask, "So, are you an hereditary peer, or were you appointed?" "Quite right, dear," said Henry Mace vaguely. Ben was sure he had only pretended to mishear the question. Then he burst into false laughter and banged on the table for attention. "I must show this to the others. Who do you think this is, everyone?" They all turned to look, with varying degrees of reluctance. Terry's irritated roll of the eyes was particularly pronounced, but Mace didn't seem to notice. He hunched up his shoulders and, in a voice that would have suited the cartoon mouse, he squeaked, "Oh, the vicar's coming to high tea and me trousers have fallen down again." Mace found his own impression extraordinarily amusing, but given the baffled looks that passed among the others, it was just as well that he identified it himself. "Is my good friend Tom Chuckle, comedian and impresario. Did I tell you about the first time I met Tom?" "Yes, you did," said Terry pointedly. Mace looked set to repeat the anecdote anyway, but happily Jeff Hornby chose that moment to enter. An older, dishevelled-looking man straggled behind him. He smiled faintly to the assembled players and quietly took a seat nearby. Hornby performed a head count and concluded, "There's one missing." "That would be the Doctor," volunteered Polly. Hornby looked at his watch impatiently. "I'm going to have to get the briefing started." "Go on, then," said Ben. "I'll fill the doc in on the details when I see him." Hornby seemed reluctant, but he agreed. As he shuffled through his notes, Polly leaned towards Ben and whispered, "You don't suppose he's in trouble, do you?" "You know the Doctor. At least if we can get this over with quick, we can set about finding him." One by one, Hornby asked the players to stand while he introduced them by both real and assumed names. Ben forgot most of the latter immediately, but found a convenient list in his briefing pack. He fidgeted awkwardly as he was announced to the others as Admiral Anchor, a brave and much decorated sailor on the verge of retirement. If Hornby noticed the absence of said decorations, he didn't comment. The latest arrival's name, his real one, was Neville Adler, and he was to portray an absent-minded scientist. "I must apologise for my lack of costume," he said, playing nervously with a frayed red handkerchief, which he then stuffed untidily into his breast pocket. "I've only just finished helping my wife with some work. She's upstairs, you know. She asked me to pass on her regrets at being unable to join us." Ben hid a smirk. No costume was needed to make this fellow look the part, he thought. Adler hesitated, realised he had run out of things to say, and made to sit down. He collided with the table instead and spilt various drinks across its top. Once Adler's profuse apologies, and his attempts to mop up the damage with his handkerchief, had died down, Hornby introduced the final player. It was the mysterious man in the leathers and dark glasses. "This is Ted Matlock. He's playing Vince Throttle, a high-tech silicon demon from the streets of New York. And to make up the numbers, I'll be taking on the role of conscientious student Andrew Bookworm myself. Hornby had already swapped his ostentatious attire for a conservative pair of cords and a woolly jumper. The pink spectacles were nowhere to be seen either, and Ben wondered how he had managed to read his notes without them. "But you already know who did it," protested Daphne. "Won't it spoil the game?" No, it won't matter. Anyway, there's the difficult part out of the way. From now on, your briefing pack should tell you all you need to know." Neville Adler frowned and rummaged through his pockets, finding nothing. "All you have to do is go and act out your part. Try to remember what your characters are doing here, what their aims are, and what secrets they're trying to keep from whom. Enjoy yourselves, but be warned, sometime in the next couple of hours," Hornby lowered his voice for dramatic effect, "there's going to be a murder." The moment was spoilt as the doors behind him were barged open. "I'm so sorry. I hope I'm not too late," said the newcomer, buttoning up the front of a plain red dress and scurrying down the steps hastily. A cheap necklace clattered against a prominent chest, and golden locks tumbled past a very familiar face. Polly put a hand to her mouth to stifle laughter. Mace shouted out, "Bravo!" and Ben covered his eyes in embarrassment. It was the doctor. The players had begun to disperse, ostensibly to go about their characters' business. Polly and Ben joined the doctor for an impromptu whispered conference. "What are you playing at, dressed like that?" Ben wanted to know, to the doctor's visible dismay. Don't you like it? I'm just helping out Mr. Hornby with a slight gender imbalance. I got the wig from the TARDIS, but I think it works rather well with the outfit, don't you?" He brushed a stray hair from his face and grinned disarmingly. "I had to improvise with the bustle, though, using coat hangers." He patted his wire-framed chest and looked comically startled as it dropped to his stomach. Polly laughed and assured him that he made a most convincing woman as he struggled to adjust himself. "Look, what about this May Day?" prompted Ben. "Have you found anything?" "Indeed I have," said the doctor, suddenly very sober. "In fact, I have a rendezvous scheduled in a little over half an hour." "With who?" "I don't know yet, Polly. Now, there were 10 people here when I arrived, including ourselves. I believe there are 12 in the hotel." "Mr. Adler said his wife was upstairs." "He would be the gentleman in the tweed coat, I presume. Yes, that would make sense. And the hotel's acting manager, Miss Hayes, would give us an even dozen. So, nobody's here we don't know about. At least, not if Thomas is to be trusted." "And you don't recognise anyone?" asked Ben. As the doctor shook his head, a polite cough took Polly's attention. She turned to find Hornby hovering behind her. "May I have a quick word in private, please, ma'am?" "Ma'am?" Of course, she recalled. She was meant to be in character. "I suppose so. You, common oik?" She bade farewell to the doctor and Ben, and Hornby led her out into the elevator lobby. They rounded the corner and pushed through a fire door into the stairwell. "I need to talk to you," he whispered, "but somewhere less public. Can you get away?" Yes, I suppose. What for?" He frowned. "Well, you know, about last night." Polly looked blank, so Hornby hissed, "It's in your briefing pack." "We're having an affair." "Oh, right, of course, yes." "Shall we say 15 minutes, then, in the gymnasium on deck B6? "Make it 20. I have to meet one of those ghastly new pop bands to discuss patronage, but I shall make my excuses and leave early." Hornby grinned his approval. "I'll see you then," he called, as he hurried off down the stairs. "Looking forward to it." "Quite a range of costumes, isn't there?" the doctor commented appreciatively. "Mr. Hornby obviously wants this to be a period piece. Now, if he could only decide which period." He and Ben had retired to a window seat beneath a dim violet light. The bar was slowly emptying. Ben watched as Ted Matlock left alone without a word to anyone. Then his attention was drawn to Daphne and Terry, who were engaged in a very public argument. For a second he wanted to intercede, but they were merely acting. "Well, your songs aren't so great, you know," shouted Daphne. "They'd sound better if they were sung properly. I'm keeping this group afloat, and you know it." "Then go and get yourself a solo career, but don't come back to me when it flops." "I might just do that." Terry turned and stormed out of the bar. Mace swooped in to comfort Daphne. "You've done the right thing, darling," he assured her, raising his voice and glancing around to make sure everyone was listening. As it happened, only Ben and the doctor remained to hear. "You have too big a talent to be held down by such petty disputes. May I venture that an association between the two of us could be of mutual benefit in the launching of a new meteoric career?" He bowed ridiculously low and almost fell over in the process. Daphne burst out laughing. The doctor stared out of the window. Ben followed his gaze across the starfield until it entirely filled his vision, and he felt suddenly isolated and very cold, and had to look away. "Do you want me to come to this meeting with you?" The doctor shook his head without looking at him. The message said to go alone. I think I should honour our friend's wishes for now. Besides, there are more important things for you to do." He was glad to hear it. "What things?" "I want you to learn as much as you can about the other guests. You can use your motives in the game as a cover for talking to them." "I suppose so." Ben pulled his creased character details from his pocket and skimmed through them. "I'm supposed to be Adler's brother for a start. Yeah, I can just see that. Oh, and according to this, I'm engaged to a Miss Lucy Buxom. Who's playing her?" The doctor turned to him and smiled demurely. "Oh, fabulous," Ben groaned. "Don't worry, I won't hold you to any promises." His serious tone underlay the jocularity of his words. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Look out of the window, Ben. Tell me what you see." "Stars, lots of them." "Do you recognize many?" He shrugged. "From Earth, yeah. The Navy taught me how to navigate. It's tricky from this angle, though." "We're looking towards the smaller Magellanic Cloud. The problem is, a large proportion of its bodies appear to have shifted. The displacement is barely visible to the naked eye, but it is there." Ben didn't know where this was leading. "So the stars have moved a bit, so what?" "You don't understand. The nearest of those stars is over 150,000 light-years away. A shift large enough to be visible from this distance can hardly be described as moving a bit. Catastrophic would be nearer the mark." "How could such a thing happen?" "In so consistent a pattern, it couldn't. Which leads me to suspect that our eyes are being fooled. We are seeing an illusion. Somewhere out there, Ben, light rays are being bent around an object and returned to a path just fractionally different from their original one." Ben mulled the statement over for a few seconds, then exclaimed, "There's an invisible ship!" "Somewhere out there, yes. And I wonder how it might tie in with our little mystery." The doctor's eyes defocused as he descended into quiet contemplation. Distractedly, he muttered to himself, "By the pricking of my thumbs."